Hello and thanks for joining us on your channel of choice, Africa Independent Television AIT. Welcome to the Signature Show. My name is Mwaboze Njoko, and in this edition of the program, Emefiele, President Muhammadu Buhari, and the burden of ways and means. The aviation minister must hear this. Extortionists lay siege to international airports, now insist on gratification from travelers in foreign currency. Plus, thank you. If you blink, you miss out. Just stay with us. Now, what did President Muhammadu Buhari spend 23.7 trillion naira on? That is what the National Assembly is now insisting on, before it considers a request by the President for an approval of that amount, which it collected from the Central Bank of Nigeria as ways and means, and which he wants the legislators to restructure for payment in over the next 40 years. Over what period of time did President Muhammadu Buhari accumulate 23.7 trillion naira? And for what purpose? Now look, Section 38 of the CBN Act states that any money collected by the federal government as loan or emergency fund in the form of ways and means advances must be refunded before collection of another one. Did any other interests benefit from the ways and means as close aides and members of the president's inner circle move to get the National Assembly to give its approval and ensure that Godwin Emefiele, the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, who granted these loans, remains on his seat? Emefiele, President Muhammadu Buhari, ways and means, the subject of our closer look in today's program. Please stay with us. Last week, Daily Sun reported that it took the intervention of a service chief to stop the Directorate of State Service, DSS, from arresting the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, at the Lagos International Airport as he returned from his annual leave abroad. According to the report, the aircraft carrying Emefiele was diverted to the private wing of the airport, where soldiers had been stationed, and the presence of the troops prevented operatives of DSS from arresting Emefiele. The report has not been refuted by any agency of government. Only the Central Bank of Nigeria issued a statement that Godwin Emefiele has resumed duty after his annual leave with renewed vigor to discharge his functions. For Emefiele's aircraft to be guided to the private wing of the Lagos airport, where troops were stationed to provide him shield from arrest, it's a clear indication that he is enjoying the protection of President Muhammadu Buhari's government at the highest level. President Buhari has himself heartily welcomed Emefiele back from his annual leave in a public display of support. But against what and against who is the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria being protected? On June 15, 2022, the House of Representatives order paper had 11 items. Item 11 on that order paper was listed as personal explanation. That item was never allowed to be brought on the floor of the House because the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Femi Gbadabia-Miller, the majority leader of the House, APC caucus members and bigwigs mounted pressure to force the item out of the day's deliberation. Our reporter obtained a copy of the order and the motion, which was listed as personal explanation. It was, or we say it would have been sponsored by Honorable Segios Ogun, PDP, Esan Northeast, Esan Southeast Federal Constituency, and was titled Call for Removal and Prosecution of Mr. Godwin Emefiele, Governor of Central Bank, for violation of the provisions of the Central Bank Act 2007. The motion never came up. But the details of the motion, which the Speaker and APC caucus in the House effectively killed, stated as follows: Call for removal and prosecution of Mr. Godwin Emefiele, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN), for violating provisions of the Central Bank Act 2007. Honorable Segios Ose Ogun. The House notes that Section 83, 1 and 2 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999, as amended, empowers the National Assembly to conduct investigations into the activities of any authority executing or administering laws made by the National Assembly. Aware that Section 38 of the Central Bank of Nigeria Act 2007 permits it to grant loan advances to the federal government in respect of temporary deficiency of budget revenue, as the total amount of such loans does not exceed 5% of the previous year's actual revenue of government. Also aware that the said Section 38 of the CBN Act provides that loans shall be repaid by the federal government the same financial year it was granted. If the government fails to repay the loan as stipulated, the powers of the Central Bank of Nigeria to grant further loans to the federal government shall not be exercised. Informed that local borrowings of the federal government of Nigeria from the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, through ways and means advances in the past 6 months have been in flagrant breach of Section 38 of the Central Bank Act of Nigeria 2007. Also informed that the said borrowings of the federal government from the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, through ways and means advances in the past 6 years has ballooned to a total of 15.51 trillion naira, going by the Debt Management Office report of March 2021. Worried that within the first 6 months of 2022, the federal government has borrowed a total of 2.4 trillion naira from the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is far above 5% of the federal government's revenue for 2021, which stood at 3.9 trillion naira. Also worried about the rising debt profile of the federal government of Nigeria, according to the Debt Management Office, which stands at 33.11 trillion naira as at March 2021, excluding the 15.51 trillion naira debt of the federal government to the Central Bank of Nigeria, resolves to urge the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to immediately remove Mr. Godwin Emefiele from office as Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria for violating the provisions of the Central Bank Act 2007. Also urge the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice to immediately prosecute Godwin Emefiele for violating the provisions of the Central Bank Act 2007. Mandate the Committee on Banking and Currency to ensure compliance and report back within 4 weeks for further legislative action. On April 11, 2021, the governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, had raised issues on Nigeria's rising debt profile, warning that Nigeria was getting into an impossible economic situation because huge amounts were being borrowed to service debt. The governor drew the attention of the nation to the printing of unearned 60 billion naira by the central bank, which was being given to states for the unproductive payment of salaries. Such printed money, which come as ways and means to meet revenue shortfalls, the governor warned, was not being put into any production to generate resources to pay back. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, denied the issues raised by Governor Obaseki, describing them as sad and untrue. She said money being given to states were not just printed by the central bank to meet shortfalls, but were actual revenue distributed at the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC, and generated by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Nigeria Customs, and Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation. But on April 16, 2021, the Governor of Central Bank, Godwin Emefiele, tacitly validated Governor Obaseki's position. He told journalists at an event in Nasarawa State that it is the job of the central bank to print money. And let's quote the CBN governor. I keep saying this. It would be irresponsible of the Central Bank of Nigeria or any central bank to stand idle and refuse to support its government at times like this. End of quote.
The National Assembly has always approved budgets containing deficits, and there has always been sources of funding the deficit stated in the budget. So if ways and means had not been stated and then the executive resorted to it, somehow is an affront against the Constitution, because they're supposed to declare it in the budget when they're going to do so. But I know as a fact that in some years the federal government had indicated they were going to fund the budget through ways and means. So it is something between the executive and the legislature they can agree on as a source of funding. And there's a recognition that ways and means can be used to fund the budget. That's why in the CBN Act you have a specific provision for it. The CBN governor and the executive, the presidency, the Ministry of Finance, they're all conspirators in violating the law. Indeed, the CBN has a restriction. It cannot give more than 5% of previous year's actual revenue. So if the federal government earned 100 billion, CBN is limited to give them in the following year not more than 5 billion. So by even giving them more than the law states.
But what does the law say in respect of the kind of support which Godwin Emefiele is providing for the Buhari administration? We took up this issue and others with the member of the House of Representatives, Sejos Ogun, who called for accountability in the allocation of ways and means by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Honorable, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, sir.
We have a challenge. The President has written the National Assembly asking for approval of about over 21 trillion naira of money he has already spent. And this money was granted him as advance by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Are there no rules and accountability process in granting these advances?
Well, under the CBN Act, Section 38, CBN Act of 2007, the CBN can, through ways and means, give monies. But it will have to be 5% of the preceding year, revenue of the country of the preceding year.
Not exceeding 5%.
Not exceeding 5%. So that is the approval they need, but carrying the National Assembly along. But I think the challenge has been, the CBN has been operating in defiance, so to speak, because today we are talking of about 22 trillion in the past 7 years. So they have been given more than 5%. And that 5% is to when you have budget deficiency, your revenue. That is when the federal government approaches the CBN and it will be given. And that loan should be paid back that same financial year. But all that now has been trashed. The CBN governor has just been on his own. Even in approving all this, if the federal government had approached the National Assembly even, to say, okay, this is where we are, I think section 83, sub 1 or so of the Constitution, 1999 Constitution as amended, allows for a contingency fund, but all that was jettisoned and became a free-for-all business. So that's the dilemma today. So if the president is sending a bill to do what? Or sending a request to do what? To approve what has been spent when it was done in defiance? That's the big challenge now that we don't even know how to resolve.
No, but there's even another issue. What is the, for want of better expression, what is the retiring process of these advances before another advance is given? Isn't there a retiring process, a time frame, a limit?
Well, again, many people have queried the independence of the central bank. But again, that is why we have 3 arms of government. The legislative arm, the executive, and then the judiciary. And the CBN brings their budget to the National Assembly. So I think the National Assembly or the legislative arm dropped the ball. I think we should have actually scrutinized this.
Spotted this?
Yes, and then take it, or this should have been taken up to say, look, you are already working outside the limit of your approval. And then that should have been dealt with long ago. But, the challenges we've faced with this government in the past years, this past 7 years going to 8 years, has been where the National Assembly has been in bed with the executive. And as they claim it, now they have claimed that we are a rubber stamp National Assembly.
Because let me interject there. I have a challenge there.
Yeah.
When they're in bed with the executive, is this romance outside of the law? Do they create their own conditions and leave the law which they promulgated or which they enacted ab initio? Yeah,
but that's the challenge. When the 2 arms can work together, but one is supposed to act as a balance, as a check and balance to the other. But when they are both in bed, all for the convenience of is one party, is our
outside
party.
Outside of the law.
Outside of the law. That is where we have found ourselves. Nobody says you cannot collaborate. That's not because people say, people say, why do they have to be fighting always? But I have always said, when the 2 arms are fighting, the legislative arm and the executive, when they are fighting, the voters, the everyday Nigerians should just observe them. Because it might be in the best of your interest. Maybe it might be for your good. Because when they're in a cozy relationship, they might just throw you under the bus. And I think that's what has happened right now. But this came under the guise of we need to protect our party. So the country is now suffering and paying seriously for it. And I dare say maybe we have also done our own job well, the opposition. So because even our house rules and the constitution allows for that, to have an opposition arm. So that when some of these things are happening, if the chairman of finance fails to support something like this because he's a member of the same party, we have an opposition. We have leadership there. They should have flagged this, But like I said, I think it's a collective failure.
I want to draw my own attention, really, to an alarm raised by the Edo State governor a little early in 2022.
Yeah.
He said...
2021, matter of fact.
I think so.
2021.
When he said that the central bank governor was printing money and giving to the states with this ways and means mechanism, and that the man was creating a challenge within the economy. And that brings me to the issue. This ways and means and the advance, what is it? Is it just that, is it promissory note, just some words, or we are printing money and giving to the federal government to offset debt?
We are printing money. It's a loan, deficiency of the budget revenue.
So we go and print additional money
up, yes. So, but I think my governor has been vindicated now, because he was so vilified then. I was actually in a meeting in the festival hall in Government House in Benin, when he was basically talking to leaders, after the victory at the polls and the inauguration it was in November, so he was meeting the leaders of the party to say, look, we don't have money in this country. The country doesn't have money now. We have to rethink. We have to reset. We have to be creative in the way we run government. So letting the leaders know. And he even made a statement that day that this is what we face. This is what comes to the states every month through FARC. And this is what comes from the internally generated revenue. By the time we do X, Y, Z, there's little or nothing. So that you all here, leaders today, will tell me, or will have to advise me on the way forward. It was just like a family meeting, But I think when he said that, the cameras were there and they picked it up. When he said that initial, this is where the federal government is today. And maybe it was a good thing he said it then. But everybody descended on him and all that. But the truth, like they say, is we always find it will always come out, and that's where we are today. But what people ask, most of my colleagues have said it, the CBN could have taken this route, or even the not CBN and the government, the executive should have taken this route. You had challenges with funding. Should have been talking about the contingency funding, and then you get the approvals. If the National Assembly was carried along from day one, maybe that would have been a creative way of doing this. Not spend, and now you are asking for approval of arrears. So that's the challenge, that's the dilemma.
I want you and I to look at what this ways and means amounts to, really. You print money and you give, for instance, to government agencies and state governments to pay salaries, for instance. That money has not been earned because the federal government has not earned that revenue. Then the federal government begins to work to give value to that money it has been cost to print.
And that's why it's a loan. It's a loan.
It's a loan.
Yes, it must be paid back. So the letter from the president right now is to document it, because you still have to pay back that loan.
Maybe by now raising appropriate revenue that will match the money that has been printed.
Exactly.
Are we not aware of the consequences of this kind of economic voodooism on, one, the value of the naira and the national economy?
Yeah, but that has become very obvious right now. So why is the naira on a free fall? When this government came, it was about, I was in the private sector then. I know the exchange rate was about 150 naira to the dollar for a long time. It was towards the election, because this same party in government now, they were overheating the policy then. So people were changing their money into dollars. Companies were leaving, So there was capital flight. That was what led to, that's why it became about 190 something, just some few days to the election.
Was entering.
And a little after the election. Then with all the political capital that this government got when they took over, if I guess the international community and all were watching, if the right things were done, I'm sure the naira still could have even appreciated a bit, because there was no war, there was no major crisis. I mean, even the president that lost the election didn't go to court. He initially said the party could go to court, but he's not going. Then eventually he prevailed on the party not to go to court, prevailed on PDP not to go to court, and no such thing happened. These were political
That
that could have encouraged the money to go back to about even max 160 naira to the dollar. But things were not done, opportunities were not taken. And then what happened thereafter? You know. So these are steps that should have been taken were not taken. That's where we are today. So rushing to print money, rushing to go beyond the limit of approval and issue money to the federal government to enable government meet deficiencies in budget revenues might just be a shortcut, but not the solution. But that's where we are today. When this government came in, inflation was single digit. But where are we today? You know. So it's not surprising that these things are happening. But I would dare say that the good news is there's an election next month.
No, even before the election comes, Honorable. So the governor of Nigeria Central Bank can go haywire, do anything that pleases him outside of the law, creates economic challenge for the nation, satisfies partisan political interests that are not in the interest of the economy, and goes home to sleep. And there are no consequences for this kind of infracting the law running down the economy.
No, I don't think he's going to go home to sleep. I doubt if he's going to go home to sleep. No. Irrespective of who wins the next election, I do not think the current CBN governor will go home to sleep. That's the truth. But that is part of what they are trying to cure now by the letter from the president to the National Assembly.
Yeah, but the president has already written, he rose in defense of the central bank governor to say, look, I approved his redesigning the Naira. I did that, and I approved his limit of withdrawal, which are some of the amendment moves being made to impress us, the ordinary Nigerians.
Well, for me, I really don't have any problem with that, because the redesign, like I say, international best practice should be done maybe like every 8 years, thereabouts. And it has been done here for 20 years. That's not a problem at all. And if you have more money outside the banks, it's a danger to this country. I mean, look at the Western world. We all travel. We don't see people using jute bag or to carry cash. And the cost of printing the cash. So we can't be borrowing money to print money so that people will have enough to carry around. That is why you don't have kidnapping in the Western world. Because if it has to go through the financial...
You can't get the ransom.
Exactly, you can't get it. So if it must be transferred, it can be traced. So all that is good. You know, if you're talking about the cash limit, all that is good. It's a good thing that he has encouraged the CBN president to do that. That we applaud. But the illegality before is what we are addressing today. So I applaud them. I will support them for that to go through. But even in the first case, we had actually started this cashless before Emefiele took over. I remember in the days of Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi, as he was then called, they were doing the cashless zonally. I remember, I think that was Port Harcourt and some other part of the South. Yes, and then Lagos, then Abuja. There's a limit to what you could withdraw and all that. That had started. So if he had continued that, we would not have been talking about this today. It would have been part of the system. The policy would have been, you know, been effective, or be effective rather. But that didn't happen. So those are the missteps. Now, when you look back in retrospect, were they deliberate to allow some of what is happening today to happen? You know, so as much as we appreciate the president for standing by the CBN governor to effect this policy, but too many things have gone wrong. And those are things I believe the president might just be helping the CBN governor to, well, yeah.
Have a soft landing?
I think so.
On what is he going to land? Shouldn't he land on stone?
Yeah, well, he's definitely going to land. Maybe the stone is just trying to make it a bit too soft so that the guy will not break his neck.
Let us see, because it is obvious that the CBN governor, by these approvals, has immersed himself in illegality. He has disobeyed the law that establishes the central bank. But, sir, who should hold the CBN governor to account, and when will you hear that?
Well, he has a whole lot right now on his plate, beside even the ways and means. So the National Assembly, yes, should have done our bit, but even the public. I knew some people had come out to say, look, ways and means, this is not the way to manage it. The former deputy governor of the CBN, Professor Mogalu, yeah, he spoke about this. And I have also seen some financial experts that have spoken about it. Some lawyers have spoken. But like I said, I think the politics in the system, not policy, the politics.
Let me hold you on to politics. Let me hold the politicians in the National Assembly to politics. Yeah. Isn't it your responsibility to oversight the central bank?
True.
And if the central bank governor goes on a printing spree and he is committing an illegality, infracting the law, isn't it right and proper to pull him back and punish him for undermining the national economy? And what is the legislature waiting for?
Some of us are not as quiet as they might make it look. I actually brought a motion to that effect sometime last year. There was a lot of pressure for me to step it down. In short, there were so many issues that were raised. It was already listed on the other paper, you know. So there was a whole lot of. I don't want to go into all that now.
But I want to hold you to something. Yeah. Where does partisanship begin and end, and interest of the national economy begins?
Yeah, I get that. I get that. We are all responsible for where we are today in this country. I say that without missing words. Yes, because when we fail to take certain steps, those steps we fail to take, or if you call it missed steps, will affect our children and our grandchildren. And that's where we are going to today. When you put interest of political party or your region or your religion before the right thing. At that time, because most times when we raise our voices about certain policies, we are called all manner of names. You know, you are doing this against your brother. You are doing this against your religion. You are doing it against... And I have several times, you know, had arguments, even on the floor of the house. When you say everybody's on one side because of religion. Everybody's on one side because they are from a particular region. Yeah, you know, so, and these are things for national interest you don't even come to play at all.
He is my thief, but you've admitted that he is a thief.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's horrible, and I pray that we can focus. I also think the lack of structure has really affected the way we've managed this country. Structure meaning strong institutions. Yes, because besides talking about the National Assembly, other bodies would have raised this long ago. Even, you know, like we were talking before coming on air here, within the CBN, the red flag should have been up to say, no, sir, we cannot approve this. Emefiele came from outside. He was appointed as the CBN governor from outside. But you have the bureaucracy. So people from within the core staff of CBN, you know, you have a legal advisor. There is a secretary to the board. Would have said, no, sir, we can't go beyond this. People should have been resigning to say, look, you endanger this whole institution if you do this. No, but that didn't happen. So we have to go back to build strong institutions that will resist, that will have the guard, the rear guards, and will protect it. You know, so it's not a one-day thing, but I believe we will get there someday.
Honorable, Emefiele didn't wake up one morning and began printing naira. Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic, I'm sure would have made a demand on the central bank for these advances. And he was making these demands outside of the law, outside of the provisions of the CBN Act, and maybe some provisions of the Constitution. Is he not culpable in this procedural rape? And what should be the consequence for him? Because this is democracy, accountability.
Of course, consequence is impeachment. But would that happen? The finance minister, I think, is a member of the board of the CBN.
No, the permanent secretary,
or the
Minister of Finance.
That reports to the minister.
The minister.
So that's what you're talking about, the rear guard that failed to protect the institution. So beside even the staff, the bureaucracy in the CBN, there's a board. So if the president says, maybe most likely the Minister of Finance said, look, we have issues with funding the budget, which is the deficiency for which this was envisaged, ways and means. And we need loan from the CBN, and this is how much we can take. But taking this will not even be enough. Somebody definitely advised the president. But in any case, he is the one we voted for. So the buck stops on his desk. So he should take the rap. So the consequences should have been an impeachment. But would that happen? I can sit it down here. I can give you a categorical answer, which is no, it won't happen.
Is there a way out of this quagmire?
The way is to vote them out next month, barely a month from today.
So we allow Muhammadu Buhari and allow Emefiele to keep their printed notes. All of us suffer until the next election.
But we have a month to resolve that, because it's too late. We have lived with them for going to almost 8 years. And we're about a month away from making the right decision. You know? So, and I hope Nigerians will not give attention to what is not. So if we are hurting, we should go to the polls and do the right thing. Because otherwise they will come back again in a different color and then begin to sell out say to us what is not. So, but this is the right time. If we say we have suffered enough, if we say we are hurting, go to the polls. Teach them a lesson. Because the advantage of that, or the good thing about that, will be whoever is coming will know that those that have sent us here, they have the power to send us out. You know? But when you allow a system and somebody comes and then they're going to repackage themselves and then come back to you and then they remain there, then you are compensating bad behavior. You know?
Honorable Segosugu, thank you very much for coming to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, sir.
At present, the National Assembly is in a quandary. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking for a retroactive approval of 23.7 trillion naira of ways and means provided by Godwin Emefiele against the law. Will the lawmakers be the obstacle to a nation run on the basis of rule of law by putting a legislative stamp on the serial rape of the Constitution and the Central Bank Act? Or will they hold somebody to account? You are watching the Signature Show on AIT. We'll take a break and return shortly. Please stay with us. Now, we all know that institutions and agencies are the vehicles through which a government in a democracy functions, delivers on its promises, and it's rated as a success or as a failure. Now, last week, at the editorial meeting of this program, we came to an unedifying conclusion that no Nigerian president can succeed for as long as Nigeria's corrupt and dysfunctional institutions remain the way they are. Now, while we identified the Nigerian civil service and at all levels of government as the most debilitating drag on governance in Nigeria, and which will guarantee the failure of even the next president for as long as he wants to operate, one, within rules, regulations, and the law, the Nigerian Airports Authority popped up with an image-damaging incident, which today is the subject of our special report. It is titled, "The Minister Must Hear This." Please stay with us. The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, FAN, is struggling, but extortionists are planting themselves firmly at Nigerian airports. They are making international travels for many Nigerians a misery, and making visits to Nigeria by international investors a reason to regret. Their methods of operation are as varied as the opportunities they identify and the level of exposure the passengers they target have on international air travel. From telling Nigerians traveling out that charges for luggages are no longer paid in Naira and offering to help any such ignorant passengers to make the payment in local currency, then reducing the weight of acceptable hand luggage, to outright open demand for payment before a passenger is allowed to board his or her flight. The network of extortionists has established a network of frustration that even brings returns to the extortionists from the most enlightened travelers. The network, which is creating a shameful international travel norm at our airports, involves immigration officials, airline staff, airport security staff, and even touts who now introduce passengers to members of the network in the name of rendering assistance. Now look at this photograph. This is the passport photograph of an Abuja International Airport security staff. At the airport, she goes by the code name Mercy, but that is not her real name. Her name is Augustina Ekwong, a staff of Pajeda ESA Securities, contracted by the Federal Airports Authority to provide security at the airport. A background check at the Corporate Affairs Commission shows that Pajeda ESC Security Services Limited was incorporated in Lagos, Nigeria on 27 April 2012 with the registration number 102986 and office address at 15 Adegbola Street, Anifowoshe, Ikeja, Lagos. It is incorporated as a private limited liability company to undertake security and investigation. The company's owners and key directors include Patrick Ejedawe, a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police, Ahmadu John, a retired Chief Superintendent of Police, Adebayo Latif, Joy Ejedawe, and Eudalo Aekenomia, secretary of the company. The company claims that it is managed by some of the very best to have served and retired from the Nigeria Police and other arms of the security forces. It proceeds to claim that, and let me quote them, "Our uniformed security guards are courteous, well-trained, highly motivated, medically fit, and experienced, with verified background records of honesty, dedication to duty, resourcefulness, and unimpeachable integrity." But on Wednesday, 11 January 2023, at about 10:20 p.m. at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja, a Nigerian, Joseph Mamel, was to catch an Air France flight to Paris. He had been cleared, checked in, and a seat allocated to him by the airline. He was to check in his luggage when a man referred to as the manager asked him if he had another passport. And this was after Joseph had presented his Nigerian passport. Joseph Mamel is an American citizen, and so had an American passport, which he handed over to the manager. Oh, the manager directed him to proceed to the front desk for a sticker to be affixed on his passport. Joseph told us the rest of the story.
I arrived at the airport, I believe it was at, I think, 10:40 p.m. It was an hour, 30 minutes before my departure. And I walked up to get my boxes checked in, where I was told by a clerk or a staff behind the desk if I had another passport. And when I replied, yes, I did, they asked me which passport. I told them an American passport, and they requested for it. And they told me that I should go meet someone else they told me I should walk back to the first desk and get a sticker. And this was the first time I had ever experienced something like this. I just thought you show them you give them the passport, and they check in your body information, and then they check in your boxes. So I go with my brother to the desk I was told to go to, where they told me that I was already late to get my boxes checked in, which was, I told them that is a lie, that I already checked in online. All I needed to do was just drop my boxes off. I already have my seat. And then she goes to talk to a man, and the man comes out yelling, saying that there's nothing they can do for me, and that the plane is filled up with boxes. There's no space for my boxes. I have never seen anything like this happen. He also told me that there was no space for me. And when I told him that I already checked in online and I had my seat already in place, then he told me there was no space in the plane to put my boxes. So it was just one thing, they will tell you something else and keep on making up excuses. So I started begging and trying to know what was going on to see if I could get help from anybody. And every single time I would approach somebody, they will refer me back to the same person and just put me around in circles. And then the lady walks up to me and tells me that the only way that they could help me is if I give them $200. I was very, very surprised because of why is a lady asking me for $200 at the airport for me to travel after I've already finished paying for my ticket, and my arrangement for the flight was already made. So I told her that I didn't have such an amount on me. And then she proceeded to tell me that, okay, if I can't give her $200, I should give her 200,000 naira. And that should help me get my boxes in. So I was very confused because they also told me that there was no space in the plane. So why are they now telling me that if I give them $200 or 200,000 naira, surprisingly and automatically there will be space in the plane for me and my brother to go through? So after being stranded, I kept on begging. They said nothing would happen if I don't give them the money. I finally gave the woman the amount she asked for. And then she goes to talk to the manager and everybody, and they let me put my boxes in. So after traveling, I felt so, I won't say annoyed, I just felt very disappointed that as a Nigerian, this is what is going on just for me to board a plane that I've already paid for. So after everything was done, I reported to the authorities who are currently working on getting justice served. And the group of people around the ticketing area they had sent to go get the stamp on the ticket all had something in common. They all had dual citizenship. They all had to be American citizens and Nigerian citizens. So I believe whenever they see the blue passport, you're automatically a target for them to extort. They all asked them for money. I know there was a man next to me on the line that I know he was arguing with them about why he had to pay an amount. And when he finally got into the plane, I asked him if they asked him for money just like me, because the lady would drag you to a corner and ask you. She won't want to say it openly. So he said yes, they asked him for money, but a different amount from what they asked me. So I believe every single person there, they were asked different amounts of money, but just it was the recurring thing. If you had an American passport, you'd be told to go to a different section and you'd be asked for money. But yes, that was what was going on. There were about 7 different people just from that time of me being there. I don't know if there are more, but I know there are 7 different people all arguing different excuses. There were some that they'll tell them that they would have to reschedule their flights for no good reason and tell them that if they still want to leave that same day, they would have to pay them some money. Some man was referred to as manager. He said, I think he was the Air France manager. He was a Nigerian man. He was, I believe every single person under that Air France, the check-in area were involved. That's my reasoning. Every single one of them. I went to every single one of them, even told them openly that this lady right there is still asking me for money. And whenever I told them that, they would do as if they didn't hear me. I told them that, I've already checked in online, paid my money for my ticket. All I have to do is just get my boxes weighed in. And that is it. And they would all playing games, sending me from one place to another. And when I did give the woman the money, she went to her manager and some other man, the man who checked in my boxes, and they all took the envelope was passed between all of them. So that means they all knew about it. So this is just what goes on there. Every single person in the ticketing area under the Air France department were all among.
Now, the picture you looked at earlier, Augustine Ekwo or Augustina Ekwong, alias Mercy, was identified and she admitted to have extorted Joseph and has refunded the $200.
The attention of our aviation security was drawn into the matter, and they took it immediately, and they swung into action. They invited the young lady, who actually confessed to, asking for that money. And eventually the money was retrieved from her, and of course was in the custody of the aviation security. He sent the account, number. Certainly the money is, available.
But who is another Musa, who is the Air France manager, to whom this fake Mercy gave the $200 after she collected it from Joseph Mamel? Now, what of the 7 travelers who were similarly harassed, disgraced, and extorted?
The airport being the gateway to the country, makes it, a cause of concern, so that whenever we are in this situation, we ensure that the culprits don't go free at all. We continue, to ensure that whoever is caught is removed and will never come to the airport again.
As much as Joseph got reprieve and the airport authorities promptly addressed the shame, more has to be done to stamp out this culture of extortion, a lack of self-respect by some operatives and contractors like Pajeda ESG. Joseph Mamel is only a whiff of a suffocating stench at Nigerian airports. The stench must be stopped. And now for our thank you. Look, it feels good to love and be loved, because love gives worth and a reason to be happy to any human being. Not to be loved is not to be accepted, and this can create emptiness in anybody. Now, for the artist and his creative license, love can be violent. It can also be tender. Now, please ask Sheyi Shodimu, a product of Igbobi College, Lagos, and Prince George's Community College, Maryland, USA, who today sweeps everything else aside with his chartbuster, Love Me, JJ.
Every day.
Well, drink, I don't smoke. I'm clean and sober. I be African man, I be exotic lover. Pretty lady, it's nice to know ya. Nice to know ya, nice to meet ya. What's your name?
Hello,
What's your name? Say what?
Sherifa.
Love me jeje, love me tender. I don't mess around, I'm not a great pretender. I'm the bad boy from Nigeria, the baddest boy in this area. You blow my mind with the way you walking. You blow my mind with the way you talking. Oh, stop. Love me jeje, love me tender.
Love me, Jaja, love me tender.
Love me jeje, love me tender.
Love me, Jaja, love me tender.
You're my sugar, my honey, my tender lover.
You're my sugar, my honey, my tender lover.
My sugar, my honey, my tender lover.
My sugar, my honey, my tender lover.
If you say you love me, I'll stay forever.
Or if you say you love me, I'll stay forever.
If you say you love me, I'll stay forever.
Or if you say you love me, I'll stay forever. Every day.
Love me jeje, love me tender.
Love me, Jaja, love me tender.
Love me jeje, love me tender.
Oh, love me, Jaja, love me tender. Every day I think of you. Every night I think of you. Said every day I think of you.
And that's our program for this Sunday. Let's meet next Sunday. And please, next Sunday, who is demarketing Imo State? And our concluding story on Godwin Emefiele Central Bank, it will be Godwin Emefiele, DSS, and terrorism financing. Watch out. My name is Mwabuze Njoko. Good afternoon.